blessings be forever showered upon all of the righteous prophets, upon Abraham, on Moses, on Jesus, on Muhammad, on all of those righteous prophets and messengers to the day of judgment. As to what follows, we thank Allah Azza wa Jal, Creator of the heavens and the earth, for this opportunity again to be with you. And I pray that Allah would bless you here in Singapore and would make it easy for you in these very trying, difficult times that we are living in today. I wanted to share with you something of a personal journey that I have been going through as an individual raised in North America with a mixed background. Different nations are within my family. I began to question my identity from a young age. What really was the role of my parents? My parents are primarily African people who came to the Americas, some before Columbus and some as political prisoners and slaves. Also, my grandmother is of the native people of America, the Mohawk Nation, who lived in the northeast corner of the United States and Canada. And I began to reflect upon my family and what history was telling us. Because when we looked at history, it told us that Columbus discovered America in 1492. And so I questioned that point in looking back at the history of the indigenous people, that history records at least 20,000 years ago, people crossing the Bering Straits from Asia into Alaska and down into the Americas. Also people crossing the Pacific from the Polynesian Islands, crossing over and reaching the coastlines in South America, Central America. And so the Americas was populated by a number of mighty nations long before Columbus. They had major cities, in some cases over 100,000 people. They had writing systems, calendars, everything that you would expect from a major civilization. And what is not so understood is that their system of organization was so powerful that it actually is the basis of the Constitution of the United States. What is not so understood is that many of the products coming out of the Americas have been sent around the world and enjoyed by people in many continents. But yet history says that Columbus discovered America in 1492. And so I question that, how can you discover a place when people have been living there for 20,000 years? How can you discover a place when your son Ferdinand reaches the mainland, because Columbus never set foot on the mainland. The son Ferdinand reaches the mainland and he finds pyramids. He finds palaces with hanging gardens. He finds a high level of organization, even higher than what he was coming from out of Portugal and Spain. So how then could you say you discovered the place? And how could history record this and make children around the world memorize this as though it is the actual reality? And so I questioned this and realized that something was wrong, something was missing. And if we really looked at history and recognized the fact that Columbus was lost, and he thought he was in India, he bumped into the Americas on his way to India. When he returned to Spain, he could not properly describe where he had been. That the real history, if I had a chance to rewrite the book, and many people are rewriting history now, I would say Christopher Columbus was discovered in 1492. You understand that? He was discovered because he was lost. And people had made it across the Atlantic before Columbus. Even history books will talk about Leif Erikson and the Vikings coming from the northern land. But there are other recorded landings, and the people in the Americas enjoyed information from all parts of the world. There's even a discussion about a great admiral in China, Chen Yu, that he took his fleets not only down here into Singapore or into Southeast Asia and over to the Middle East, but there is a discussion that he took some of the fleets across the Pacific. So in searching for this real history, in trying to understand more about my identity, I came across so much information that had been suppressed. And by bringing this information together, it gave me a fuller understanding of who I was as an individual and what I had to do in the future. But I also recognized that I came from a Christian family. And that being from a Christian family and worshiping in a church, I was growing up in the 60s. And many young people at that time were questioning authority, questioning society, everything. I questioned some of the images that were being projected to me. The images of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, peace be upon him, as a person from Europe, when the actual reality was he came from the Middle East. And even in the Bible he was described as a person with curly hair and skin like burnt grass. So the images being projected were images that were not in line with the history of that religion. Also, in studying the history of religions, I recognize the fact that there are some religions, and people have their choice. There are some religions that are based upon nature. And so they develop their holidays and their ceremonies around the changing of the seasons, around fertility, around the growth of vegetation. And so they look at the year and they have the medium point of the winter, which is called the winter solstice. And they have the medium point in the spring, which they call the spring solstice. And then the summer and the fall. And so major events were happening at this time. In the winter, around December 25th, ceremonies were being held in the northern countries, because in those countries it is dramatic. What is going on now, the snow is falling, the trees are dying. And that is something that we living in this tropical temperate zone, we don't go through this change. But in the northern countries, it is a dramatic change that happens. Everything is dying. But there's one tree that is alive. That is the fir tree. And so because of the light, the people said, what is inside of this tree? And so they took the tree and put it inside of their homes. Because they felt that the life force inside of the tree, if it was able to continue in the cold climate, it could also give them benefit or protect them from evil. And so they put it inside of their homes, and they started to light bonfires outside, hoping that the sun god would return. Later on, when the bonfire stopped, they put a star or a light on top of the tree. They also used a holly and mistletoe, putting them over their doors. All of these were part of a nature cult that based their religion on the changes in the season and the power coming from the natural things. The Greeks had the Bacchanalia. The Romans had the Saturnalia, right around the same time. And so I realized, as a student of history, coming out of the teachings of Jesus, peace be upon him, that something was happening. Because when his followers went into Europe, they came in contact with these other religions, and somehow an amalgamation came about. And so a new form was developed, where there are some of the teachings of the original founder, and also the teachings of the sun-worshipping, nature-worshipping people who were dominant at that time, incorporated together. And so now, we have what we call the Christmas celebration. But most people, when they celebrate